Welcome again. Yes, sir. We back at it again with another episode of the Salted Nets podcast. I'm gonna let that rock. Intro music is new. Still getting used to it. People, what's going on? It has come to my attention that I am not sure what episode any of these last few episodes have been. Right? And let me give you a little bit of a glimpse behind the curtain on that. We are sipping, by the way, tequila, of whom's name we are not aware, because they don't pay us. But we are sipping today. Today's a special episode, a little bonus episode. First, we'll start with what I was already going to talk about. I'm not really aware of the episode structure that we have going on because Biggs and I have been working on bringing this podcast to life for so long and have recorded so many test episodes. Not only test episodes, I think that consistency is really, really key when it comes to this podcasting medium. You guys knowing what to expect and everything like that. And now that we kind of have this ship rolling and hopefully we will have people who tune in weekly, we want to try to keep to a schedule. So that you guys can expect the pod and so that you guys don't forget about us in the times that we don't release. But if you notice, we used to keep episode numbers and eventually we just got mixed up because this episode didn't come out in time, or this episode, by the time we got around to releasing this episode, it was old. So this is also going to be the resurgence of the numbers. So what is a bonus podcast? Bonus podcast is something that I've been kind of toying with the idea of. I think that there is one up, so some of you may be familiar with it. Usually it's reserved for moments when I want to kind of do a statistical deep dive, or I kind of want to touch on a concept that maybe it's probably better to do in a script form. Or just have certain discussions about one particular player in long form that I don't necessarily want to drag Biggs out of his house for. Probably another reason that we'll do them sometimes is if we can't get next to each other in time and we don't have episodes banked in order to get you guys the episode at the right time, then what'll happen is I'll give you guys a bonus episode and it'll probably just be 2 episodes in that week, right? But I don't want to get into the habit of you guys not having episodes, right? We're finally getting this thing on the road, and I think that people may be finally expecting episodes from us. Maybe they're enjoying the show. And in that way, I do want to serve you guys, because the whole point of this is to build a community, of like-minded individuals, or even people who aren't like-minded, for us to embrace our shared love of the sport and the goings-ons. Your man Anthony Davis signed a big one. It's not his first time signing a big one, but we do got to show love. Every time one of these players signs a big one, and what seems like the get the bag Olympics going on nowadays, we have to celebrate. And we just spoke on the pod about Jaylen Brown receiving this huge, massive contract extension, and how the next time, sometimes a team gets caught left holding the bag, where there's a bunch of new TV money, and maybe we should do a CBA episode, because I need to understand the TV money in the CBA far better than I do. But there have been some changes to the CBA, and there are constant changes to the TV money. Honestly, the first time that I remember hearing the phrase TV money, wow, we've reached that point where I genuinely don't remember. It's probably been a good 4 to 5 years at least, but I remember the first big influx of TV money that I was aware of, that my consumption of sports news had made me privy to. And it was warned like, yo, we are going to see crazy salary cap flips and all type of weird things, and the value of players will fundamentally change once teams have more money to play with and once the league has more money to play with. And value is subjective, right? We all know that. We're all privy to the expression, you only deserve what you can command, or what you get paid, or whatever the case may be, but or you only earn what you can negotiate, right? You're only worth what you can negotiate. And the players, I will never shit on them for negotiating some of these deals. However, what we do have is this playground that has been created around the sport, right? Which is part of the reason the sport is so interested in the first place, which is part of the reason that you can collect so many dollars from people who don't even watch the fucking games. It's because the chatter, the discourse around the game is really the only thing keeping us from ending our lives. So here we are, talking about a contract yet again. And in the last episode, when we spoke about sometimes the team gets left holding the bag, where there's a player who, by virtue of what he can negotiate and what he means to the team, is able to command far more than what you may perceive to be that player's value. Right? It doesn't happen extremely often, but it happens often enough that we all know when it's going to happen, and we kind of all start projecting about that player a year or two before it happens. And the same is true with Jaylen Brown. And in that conversation, I said to Biggs that the next guy it's probably going to be a while, or it's going to be a big guy. It's going to be somebody who nobody even questions. And what you don't want to be in a position, unless you have to, quite honestly, I think that the Celtics found themselves in a position where they really had no choice. They have committed publicly to this core, and committing publicly is just that. It is committing publicly. You are well within your rights to change your mind, to go in a different direction, right? Niggas get shot every day, B. My whole point with that, though, is there are some players who we won't question, or who we know that, all things considered, if everything's breaking right, they deserve this bag. And then there are players who it's like, eh. And one thing I said is like, yo, the next guy is going to be a big guy. It's going to be Anthony Davis, or it's going to be Jokic, or it's going to be Luka. It's like, it's not going to be somebody that we question. Every few years, it seems to be somebody who we question that gets the biggest fucking bag that you can imagine, the biggest bag in NBA history, which we'll just see. At this point, I have no idea other than to drive traffic. Because one thing that having something to promote has taught me is that everything is in the name of traffic. Catch me in traffic, nigga. Catch me in traffic. Catch me on this internet traffic, nigga. You understand what I'm saying? But everything is about traffic. So every time we hear reported, which we will hear damn near every other summer for the next fucking 15 years, apparently, every time it's reported that this is the largest contract in NBA history, I feel like everybody in the know just rolls their eyes, where it's like, all right, but we're going to keep giving out the largest contract in NBA history. Like, this is going to happen so often that at this point it becomes a little, like, what is it, a footnote? Why? I understand why it matters. I just don't understand why we should ever give a fuck at this point. Until some of this, like, extra money starts slowing down, I don't see what it means to be the highest paid player in the NBA right now. It's just a rotating door. Right? And every single time a player who is eligible for and up for some kind of contract of that magnitude stands to benefit from it, they'll benefit from it. And we'll all act shocked at the number. So Anthony Davis, ironically, does have some questions probably surrounding this contract, but it is the same questions. They are the same questions, I believe, that have probably surrounded every major contract he signed. For the better part of the last decade, which is just his health. The concerns around Anthony Davis are his health. And me personally, at the beginning of this season, I was of the opinion that Anthony Davis, number one, no longer looks like the specimen athletically. While he is still incredibly athletic and incredibly impactful on both ends of the floor, he does not look, at least on offense, to me to be the physical specimen and dynamo that we have expected him to be on a nightly basis. And my personal opinion on it was that his career was beginning to be, for lack of a better term, marred by injury, if you will. Now, he's also approaching an age where, especially for a guy of his size, it's no shame not to be in your absolute physical prime and at the peak of your fucking powers physically. But I do think that Anthony Davis is one of these he don't hoop all-stars where he doesn't play a shit ton of games, and it's not for lack of toughness. I've watched Anthony Davis play through some shit I personally may not have advised him to play through. What do I know? I'm not a sports scientist. I'm not a sports doctor. But I've definitely seen homie come back from some shit that would leave me very far away from ever questioning his fortitude or his willingness to go out there and play. I do question, however, whether or not the injuries are taking their toll. Like, sports science and sports medicine has gotten us to a place now where there are just players who are injury prone, and we patch this thing up and we keep it together and we keep them out on the court and they perform well enough on a damn near nightly basis where it doesn't really seem to be that much of an issue. I wouldn't say it's not that much of an issue for Anthony Davis. I think that there are real precautions to be taken when every time you hit the floor, a fan base is terrified, right? Be it the fan base of the team, be it just the cult of you as a player, the cult that surrounds and follows you. We are concerned every time you make a violent move on the court, right? And I just mean like an aggressive one, like any kind of real torque followed by you hitting the floor is crazy. Niggas ain't trying to see it. So that's $186 million, and I'm not sure the Lakers had a choice. And this is not a Jaylen Brown situation where it's a question of if he deserves it. There's a question as to if we'll ever see that guy that we saw in some of the latter years in New Orleans again, where this is like a legitimate 30-a-night threat who's also possibly the most dominant defensive player in the league. I think you're going to get one or the other. I think the defense will always be phenomenal. So I'll lean with him being a defensive player of the year caliber player really every year that he's healthy for the foreseeable future. I think the offense, again, he's not necessarily needed. He's not the fulcrum of this offense as he was in New Orleans, and maybe he shouldn't have been there. Maybe some of what we were seeing was just because he was forced to do some of these things. But it does feel like he's taking a bit of a step back. Not a regression, but a bit of a step back offensively, and I fear that some of it may be the limitations of physical ailments that he's been dealing with. But he signs a 3-year, $186 million max extension that I don't think you can argue whether or not he's well deserving of. You can argue whether or not the Lakers want to be the ones to pay it to him, but the Lakers are heavily invested in star power. And when they got LeBron James, it was with the understanding that as soon as possible they would pair him with another star, and a star that they could have lead them into the future during LeBron's twilight years. And I think Anthony Davis has been, quite honestly, that, but for the concerns we have about his health and consistency related to such. And this is an extension, right? So if anybody's thinking, wow, this isn't like 250, this is a 3-year extension, right? So you can just imagine at 3 years, 186. I'll leave it to you to imagine what he would have made if this was like a 5-year deal raw, right? This is similar to what Damian Lillard did, where we're talking about his deal in terms of the extension at this point. But if you just view it over the long term, this was just really the adjustment to make him paid what a player of his ilk today commands in the league, right? And shout out to that. We'll see that kind of restructuring as often as we need to see it, and as often as these players can and will pull it off. I'm not of the opinion that this is a crazy thing. I don't know what the Lakers are supposed to do, as I don't think that any of the concerns about being able to lean on Anthony Davis into the future to be the best player on a championship team. And you might be able to argue that if they win the championship next year with LeBron James on the team, that kind of no matter what, Anthony Davis is probably based on his defensive output alone, again, unless LeBron James ramps it up to a level we just, at this point, every single year have trouble fathoming until it happens. Then, Anthony Davis is probably going to be the most important player on any championship team that LeBron is a part of for the foreseeable future, and probably in the year that they won the chip. I don't think many people would argue against it. Perhaps LeBron was the best player still, but Anthony Davis may or may not have been the most important player. And with the bubble, and how intense the bubble was, and how it was kind of designed for a player who had developed the level of mental fortitude that LeBron had at that time, you could still argue he's probably the most important player, because if he's not in the bubble with them, or if his mind isn't as sharp, as iron sharp as it was, and as focused as it was, I don't know that Anthony Davis would have just been able to be that beacon, and nor should he have. Like, this is well past 30 years old, LeBron James, and Anthony Davis is probably like 30, if that. So he's learned a lot from LeBron James from a leadership perspective. You just hope that he'll hold up, because I personally have never had any questions about Anthony Davis's talent. I think that the days of comparing him to guys like Joel Embiid may be behind us. I think Joel Embiid is pretty much, no matter what, is going to shake out to have had a more impressive individual career than Anthony Davis. And I remember when that was a real point of discussion and even contention for me, back when Anthony Davis was on New Orleans and Joel Embiid was burgeoning. But hey, I don't make the rules, and I still probably like Anthony Davis a little better. Just me personally, just the aesthetics of his game, and I suppose visually he appeals to me. Not that Joel Embiid doesn't, but I still believe in peak Anthony Davis. I still believe in peak Anthony Davis. And I think that now we get to see that moment where perhaps some of the Tim Duncan and Kevin Garnett comparisons, because I remember when people used to say that Anthony Davis was like Tim Duncan and Kevin Garnett rolled into fucking one. And those players are so great that I think that comparison can lose people immediately. Just because it's like, well, is he individually as great as either one of those guys by themselves? But we're supposed to compare him to both of them. But I think we're talking about elements of his game and some of the things that he could do. I do think he has an opportunity to remind us, to evoke thoughts, to evoke memories of those players in the way that he changes his game next. Anthony Davis, I think, is a prime player from a versatility perspective, from a physicality perspective, and from a fundamental soundness perspective. I think that he is a prime player to show us a real market shift in the way that he approaches the game and the way that he approaches his body. And it can maybe be a more careful approach, a less physically demanding approach, but an equally dominant approach, right? Maybe like less of this explosive force that's just knocking holes in this brick wall and more of this constant strength just exerted against it until slowly you move it. And I think that the job has to get done however it gets done. The interesting thing about these players' careers are when you break up the highlight tape later and you watch him in this jersey and you watch him in that jersey, or you just watch this part of his career and you watch that part of his career. Like watching 84 Jordan is amazing because you know what 96 Jordan is. And you know where he comes from. And it's amazing to see what he's still got left, what he's taken with him from that part of his career, from those high points of his game, and also what he's added that didn't exist before, or just the ground game and the post game that didn't exist before. Like we have a chance to see that type of thing with Anthony Davis, as we've seen it with other great players. We've seen LeBron James do it. We've seen Kobe Bryant do it. Quiet as kept, we've seen Kevin Durant do it. We have seen great players do it. And Anthony Davis is undoubtedly a great player. First ballot Hall of Famer, top 75 all time. I agree with. We're always going to talk about whether or not Dwight should have made it if he made it. But I want to talk about that in a vacuum, which may be impossible, right? Because by nature of a top 75 list, there are people being excluded. And so I think perhaps the only real honest way to discuss that is in a comparative fashion, because that's how the list was made. They compared these players and they said, this guy deserves to be here, this guy doesn't. Maybe they didn't have a direct relation to each other with the reasoning, right? Like Bill Russell is going to go on every top 75 list. I was listening to Austin Rivers, who will cycle back to. I was listening to Austin Rivers on a podcast for The Athletic. I should know the name of this podcast. I don't, but you all know it. It's like one of the main ones. It'll pop up on your feed like every fucking day. And he's given this wonderful soliloquy about his top 10 list and how he makes it and how he's focused on basketball and who's better. And then he gives a spot on his top 10 all-time list. A list which includes the likes of like Kobe Bryant and LeBron and Kevin Durant over Larry Bird. I believe he left Larry Bird off the list to put Bill Russell on the list. And we can't talk about Bill Russell honestly. They don't want us to. It's not that we can't, as a matter of fact. They don't fucking want us to have a real conversation about Bill Russell. And this is with respect to the idea that as a 26-year-old, I am probably more cognizant of what made Bill Russell special than most of my peers. I have probably gone back and watched more footage of Bill Russell doing freakish shit that would stun me in today's league than my peers, right? I am well aware that Bill Russell was more versatile than he gets credit for, that he initiated the offense in some capacity sometimes, that it is not impossible to find clips of Bill Russell dribbling the ball at the top of the key, jumping over a man in transition, like having handled the ball, I think damn near the whole way down in transition. It's not that I don't think Bill Russell could play today. It's not that I don't think that Bill Russell will be great today. If we hold against these players what they have seen done before, or if we hold against these players that they're standing on the shoulders of giants, at the same time, I would like to hold the Giants accountable to a certain degree for not having the benefit of standing on their own shoulders. Bill Russell has not had the impact on this game that a guy like Hakeem Olajuwon has. Maybe culturally he has. People talk all the time, well, when a guy wins that much, there weren't as many teams in the league. End of story. Full stop. The talent was not comparable. End of story, full stop. That's not to say Elgin Baylor wasn't phenomenal, wouldn't be a star in today's leagues given today's access to today's technology. I don't know. That's not to say Pistol Pete Maravich wasn't the fucking truth, one of the coldest motherfuckers ever to handle or shoot a rock. I'm not saying that. That is not to say that any of these players in the past, Bill DeBuscher, whoever the fuck you want to call out, George Mikan, that's not to say that these guys weren't phenomenal athletes and basketball players, simply that they were not playing under the same circumstances or under anything near the rules that the players are playing now, or in a league that resembles even really slightly the league that we play in now. Motherfuckers were losing scorecards. I'm sorry, I'm not shitting on them. Like, professional athletics was a relatively new thing. The NBA or just professional basketball in general, whatever you want to call it, because there were different leagues called different things at the time. Whatever the fuck you want to call it. Hey, man. Motherfuckers wasn't out here doing the same thing. And while we acknowledge the disadvantages, like them motherfuckers having a truck, like literally truck through fields with big-ass backpacks on, And in order to get to their hotel, the only hotel that they were allowed to stay at, dealing with racism, the trash ass travel conditions, the trash ass care that they received for their bodies, they did the best that they could. While we acknowledge all that, we also have to acknowledge that they weren't doing the same thing as the guys that we're watching now. So I wonder how a guy like Austin Rivers can create a list which is, in his mind, so based on reason and sound basketball knowledge, and then throw Bill Russell in the top 10 over Larry Bird. Like, dog, I guess the only argument you could, because I don't want to, who gives a fuck about winning when one person's playing in a league with 25 teams and one person's playing in a league with 8? You know what I'm saying? Like, fuck winning. The winning is not the same. I don't even like when people compare ring counts across eras. Like, we as fans get into these illogical conversations that go nowhere, that can go nowhere. And perhaps that is the fun. Perhaps we just want to have these conversations ad nauseum to infinity and beyond. I grow tired of them because I think that there are more interesting conversations that can be had, especially if we're not going to come to a fucking conclusion at the end of them anyway. But we just, like, he throws Bill Russell on the list and he's just like, well, you know what I mean? Your guy wins that much, you got to put him on the list. Nigga, Larry won a lot. He ain't win as much as Bill Russell, but who the fuck else on the list did? What are we doing? If the reason for having Michael Jordan on the list, I didn't hear out of his mouth was, well, come on, 6 rings, then how the fuck is the Bill Russell on the list? Just because of 10 rings. And he put Kevin Durant over Larry Bird, which I liked. That was ballsy, and I like that. Because a lot of people wouldn't stand on that. A lot of people would let motherfuckers sway them off that. But Austin Rivers seems to be shaping up to be a really good commentator. Right? Taking advantage of a lot of different opportunities that he's presented. I like that a lot of these players are jumping into the commentator role early. I think when I was younger, I didn't really understand it. I liked it. I just didn't know what it would look like because it wasn't common. It wasn't normal before guys like Draymond started doing it. Before guys like Pat Bev started doing it. Like, it just wasn't as normal a thing. Usually it was just like you wait until they retire and that's how that goes. But I've really been enjoying it. And seeing the fruits of it and seeing it take form, even seeing all these players expand into the world of podcasting. I podcast and I'm independent and I don't have my foot in any doors and I'm not a journalist. So far be it from me to shit on the players for establishing podcasts, right? I'll leave that to Stephen A. Smith because they have legitimate, right? This is legitimate beef. The players have started their own networks and they're talking shit about Stephen A., kind of like how he talks shit about them. And he doesn't really like it when his professional accolades have been assailed, right? But the difference with Stephen A. Smith is it's not fair, my nigga. You doing a lot of huffing and puffing, and I like the showmanship. First of all, I don't think anything that Stephen A. Smith does is genuine. That's not to shit on him. That's to say that there's an element of showmanship to everything that he does. I don't genuinely believe that as intelligent as Stephen A. Smith is, but the only thing that could make it possible for him not to respect what's going on here with the players is ego. And I've never heard him talk out of pocket about players podcasting unless it was to illustrate that he could do the same thing to them that they do to him. So this is not to shit on Stephen A. Smith. But you don't get to win no championships, dog. Ain't no championships in your field. Your championships is every time you sign a new fat deal, a new fat check. And then we celebrate you like you won one. When these guys sign a new big deal, a new fat check, you criticize them and hold them accountable in every other way other than to talk about what they did to earn that money in the first place or the real reasons why they have the leverage to command that kind of money. Now, I do the same thing. Literally. So I'm not shitting on Stephen A. Smith, but you gotta eat crow sometimes, baby. Just like Damian Lillard gotta come to the table and eat this crow, Stephen A. Smith, you gotta come to the table and we serving you some birds. We serving you some birds. We serving birds like Demencio, nigga. It's happening out here. That's just what we doing, bro. It's time for and I think Stephen A. Smith, like I said, is a phenomenal showman. I think that this will be a win for him no matter what. I do question what the fuck is going on over there in the House of Mouse, though. Stephen A. Smith getting raunchy, dog. Stephen A. Smith on the internet's talking about prostitution, dropping F-bombs, criticizing. Stephen A. Smith ran a segment on his show where he did the Who Was on Crack bit about Hunter Biden, son of the sitting president of the United States. And I am an American citizen. I am all about speaking truth to power, saying whatever the fuck you want about whoever, right? We can't live in this nation of free speech and then want to fucking crucify people if they don't say Mr. President when they're talking about a motherfucker, or if they talk about the president like a regular human being, as if the president is not flesh and blood like you or I, right? But then we all have to be more sensitive. I mean, we all have to be less sensitive, right? Obviously, there are different undertones and different reasons why somebody like me may be sensitive to what... to certain criticisms people may levy against Barack Obama. Not really here for the he's not a citizen talk. However, right, it is within people's rights not to like the sitting president. It is within people's rights to criticize the sitting president any way they want, the same way they would criticize another American, as long as it is within the bounds of their freedom of speech. Because a lot of y'all motherfuckers don't understand freedom of speech. You think it gives you the green light to say whatever you want, be damned how anybody feels. And I would just encourage you, like I encourage everybody, to do a little bit of reading. Grab some literature on the subject. It is not what you think. It is not that bad. It is kind of great, just like you think it's great. But I promise you, nigga, it is not what you think. But speaking of freedom of speech, I get to wondering what the fuck is going on with Stephen A. Smith over there. I am concerned. I am scared they're going to take his bag. Because didn't Jamel Hill, wow, that was wild racist. I just replaced her name with Smith. I might as well have said Johnson. Give it up for me being a vicious racist. It is what it is. We got to keep it funky. But I'm going to wrap this segment up anyway. I just get concerned with Stephen A. Smith because I'm like, yo, we have seen motherfuckers lose their jobs at the House of Mouse for less. I think we might be watching the major flexing of his fucking worth to the company, because I don't see him losing his job. Stephen A. Smith has always moved in a way where, unless he doesn't want to be on ESPN anymore, I couldn't see him conceivably just like putting his fucking foot in his mouth without being aware he's doing so. Right, so there must be language in his contract that has freed him up to speak, honestly, as freely and candidly as he's ever spoken before publicly. And I love that for him, because that's content for us. So I love that for him like I love that for us. But this was a long-ass segment, so we're going to have to talk about FIBA at some point. So the FIBA thing has got people in fucking knots. And I am frustrated by the conversation, because I think that when it comes to world basketball, we have always kind of had the wrong conversations. And it's difficult to have any conversations surrounding Olympic performance if it's not purely journalistic, because nationalism is ironically the scourge of this nation. And to put it quite simply, people who don't even watch the games put a lot of pride and stock in the performance and health of the United States men's Olympic basketball team and FIBA team. because they are trying to reposition the FIBA World Cup as the premier global basketball league. I think it has been for other countries for quite some time. And now the United States wants to be a part of that. I think that what happens is we tend to lose sight of the fact that, honestly, from a sheer depth standpoint, we do have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to the talent of the average player on the average team in our league. And we tend to forget that we should win games sending the most star-studded rosters out there, but we should also win games and trophies and medals sending these guys out there, the guys that either represent kind of future faces of the league from what we can see right now, or just are really, really incredibly serviceable, incredibly talented players, because to be that at the NBA level means something entirely different. Now, there are monsters out there. There are different beasts, right? There are guys like Nikola Jokic, Giannis, Luka. They exist, right? The guys that are playing for Canada, is Shai Gilgeous playing for Canada? Is Jamal Murray playing for Canada? Is Corey Joseph playing for Canada, right? I won't say that they're not monsters now who would be the best player on the court, no matter who we fielded, and therefore you might want to send your best and brightest to kind of stave that off, because those guys can win a game if they're the best player on the fucking court. But here's the problem. Those are the best players in the league. And that's kind of where we go. For the first time probably in my entire life, I'm at a point, and I've been waiting for this point to happen. There have been players who have ended up staying really good for much longer than I thought they would. But 5, 6, 7 years ago, I was beginning to contemplate an NBA landscape. First of all, in 2014, think about the fact that in 2014, we thought we could comfortably map out the end of LeBron's career. In fact, NBA 2K12, I believe, had done it in the sorry ass excuse for a LeBron moment mode where they let us play future moments in LeBron's career and tried to predict what he would do. Had him going back to Cleveland, right? So that was great. But it's just it becomes, and it became then a question of, what is this league gonna look like? Right, I was asking this question before Giannis seemed like he was going to be who Giannis is, before Jokic was even a thought, right? Before Luka Doncic was a thought, right? I was asking these questions because the guys that I viewed as young when I was 10, 11, 12, 13 years old had begun to age, right? Had begun to age. They were in their prime when I started following the sport, and were now in their early to mid 30s, right? LeBron, towards the end of that Cleveland run, was 35, 36. And now Russell Westbrook was 32, 31. Kevin Durant is now 34 going on 35 or something like that. So at the time, you know what I mean? It's just, you start to say in 10 years, this guy probably won't be playing, right? Some of them obviously were and will, but some of these guys won't be playing. I wonder what the landscape of the league is going to look like without them. Is this a new golden age? Will we see players able to carry this torch? And the answer is yeah. Yeah, it was the beginning of a new golden age, and we're still flush in the middle of it. And we have seen players, maybe not a singular LeBron James level guy, and that will come again. The nature of this league is that will come again. All right, the individual is all important in the NBA, and it's not just when you only have 10 players on the court, 5 for each team, and one guy just has the ability to affect the game massively. And if he's the right size, and if he's got the right skill set to drag you to good seasons on his fucking own, right? A Damian Lillard can do these things given the right circumstances. So it's not that individuals win basketball games because teams do that. It is that the individual can have such an impact, can produce so many points relative to the team's points, can be directly responsible for so many points if you count playmaking for others as well and just scoring gravity, that it is ridiculous the effect that these guys can have on a team. And maybe we haven't seen the LeBron James level guy who encompasses every single aspect of greatness and then has the personality to carry the league damn near on his own, when there were guys perfectly capable of carrying it with him. And I think there are guys who we've seen shoulder it with him, but it's undoubtedly been the face of the league for his entire career. Undoubtedly been the league's ambassador, the league's most important spokesperson for the entirety of his career. I do not remember a life of basketball fandom. Keep in mind, I was born in 1996, so this is not news. I am not aware of a basketball world that does not revolve around LeBron James. I lived in a basketball world briefly where LeBron James had not won a championship. Yes. I cannot remember a world where a basketball discourse did not on some level revolve around LeBron James. Even in 2003 and pre-2003, we were watching it begin. Maybe all of it didn't revolve around him, but we were watching it begin, and we were already in the beginning throes of it. By 05, 06, 07 to now, dominating the discourse with very few missteps. And I think one of my next bonus pods is going to be a real look at how LeBron James has kind of walked and blazed a path that I don't think any other athlete will be able to do the same as him. And he hasn't done it perfectly. But just a lack of missteps, right? Just a dearth, if you will, of poor decisions. Like they're not many to find. Even if you disagree with them, even if you would have went about things differently on and off the basketball court, you will be hard pressed to find like bad decisions, right? And again, you could say that about a guy like Jokic. You could say it's just, but then you got the charisma, then you've got the marketability. Like it's everything. When God gave the NBA a second Michael Jordan. And I don't care what you think about, well, don't compare him to this. Fuck all that. I'm just telling you in terms of cash cowdom, God gave the NBA another Michael Jordan fucking 5-6 years after Michael Jordan retired. Phenomenal. You got to love that. And a different Michael Jordan. We got to watch the story unfold a different way. And God seems to give the NBA this quite often because one player can have such an impact, right? Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was this. Michael Jordan, and I think that it's underplayed how impressed people were with Michael Jordan at pretty much every level of his career, because he didn't make that varsity squad when he was like a fucking sophomore, right? Back when you weren't guaranteed to play varsity just because you were really good, right? So I think that people make a lot of that, but like Michael Jordan, yeah, like this was back before every good player got like funneled to like some high profile school. And so Michael Jordan kind of flew under the radar, right? But like Michael Jordan ended up at a 5-star camp with his with a teammate. I think was it a future North Carolina teammate, was that Buzz Peterson? I don't know. I haven't done my diligence on that in so long. But yeah, like Michael Jordan like blew people away at the fucking 5-star camp, and like college coaches were like trying to hide him, how fucking good he was. And I think he averaged a triple-double his senior year or some shit like that. Like Michael Jordan was no slouch at any level before this, but he definitely, the way that he impacted the game and how dominant he was as a scorer, as an isolation threat as well. And really, like, the most impressive thing about Michael Jordan for me is going to always be, I don't think we will ever see a two-guard that dominant in the post again. I'm not of the opinion that Kobe Bryant was as proficient in the post as Michael Jordan. Maybe Kobe Bryant had more moves in the post, and that's I wouldn't just say that, right? But the thing, as a 26-year-old consumer of basketball in the year 2023, that consistently blows me away when I go back and look at Michael Jordan games and I look at Michael Jordan footage, is the not only the frequency to which he would hit the post, but the sheer fucking skill and options that he had out the post. Like, within fucking 10 feet of the basket, Michael Jordan was a threat on so many different levels. It didn't matter if he had a head of steam or not. And what was also interesting about that is Michael Jordan became the prototypical idea of a two guard for a long time until we realized that they just don't fucking make them like that. And we got Kobe so close to Michael Jordan that I think people were like, no, yeah, this is what like shooting guards are going to look like. No. I don't know. DeMar DeRozan ain't Michael Jordan. None of these motherfuckers is Michael Jordan. And this is not like a Michael Jordan polishing contest. I'm just saying, like, the idea of what Michael Jordan was as your two, as your wing, as your smaller wing, right, playing opposite Scottie Pippen, right, would be the smaller wing on a lot of NBA teams today. What he brought to you, you just don't see that. You don't see that. You might get a guy who has similar dimensions. You might get a guy who's 6'6" with long arms and a really nice vertical leap, right? You might get a Jason Richardson. You might get a Vince Carter. You don't get another Michael Jordan. Just in how he dominated the game and where he dominated the game. Again, Kobe is probably the closest thing to it, but even that I think was very different. Like the Michael Jordan thing, like it was really, it was positionless when he hit the post. It felt that way. And the NBA was gifted LeBron James. I don't know who's next. We are at that point where I don't know who's the next singular guy, right? I am a huge believer in Jokic. I know who's going to amass the resumes. I know I know which players are going to amass the resumes that evoke LeBron comparisons. Jokic is probably he might have 3 or 4 MVPs when this is all said and done. Just almost won 3 in a row and almost averaged a triple double. Was a hair's breadth away from averaging a triple double out here in these streets. So, hey, Giannis, who knows what the fuck he has left to accomplish? We know it's phenomenal things. We know it's records, but again, it's not that we won't see players whose accolades will be evocative of LeBron James. Just like it's not like we haven't seen players whose accolades have been evocative of Michael Jordan. I don't know if the next LeBron, I don't know if the next guy in that archetype is playing right now. I sure hope he is. But hopefully I live a long time. So shit, part of me sure hopes he's not. Let's see what happens. I'm going to need something to watch when I'm 45. I will. So this has been the second bonus cast. Again, you'll probably get 2 episodes this week. Biggs and I just couldn't get next to each other just in time to bring you this episode. And just in case we don't get next to each other, or just because I want you guys to get used to the structure and the schedule that we have. And we don't have a lot of episodes in the bank for Salted Nets yet. We don't even know if we can have episodes in the bank. We'll have to record special evergreen episodes to keep in the bank because of how current this podcast tries to be. So this is a little different from the normal bonus cast, which will be just me in a more scripted form, kind of delving into some of my more personal thoughts about metrics and numbers and concepts. But this particular episode was in order to just serve you guys in the event that we are not able to get next to each other, or just while you're waiting, right? If we make you guys wait, you deserve a little bit of bonus content. And listen, we got a few listeners, right? There's like 5 of you now. Make some fucking noise for the 5 of you. There's like 5 of you now, right? And at the risk of sounding corny, the reason that I was drawn to music, the reason that I'm drawn to podcasting is I just want friends. I just want, we have an opportunity in this day and age to kind of create or find our tribes, as corny as that sounds. And as much as I don't like to speak in aphorisms, we just have an opportunity to meet people who are kind and be kind to each other. And I want to be a part of spaces like that. And the same way that when you want to see certain people, certain qualities in the people in your life, you should look in the mirror sometimes and wonder if you'd be best served discovering and nurturing those qualities in yourself before you demand them out of others. I think that I view community much in the same way. that we spend a lot of time wishing, wanting, demanding to be in community and to find people with whom we can be comfortable and kind. So sometimes maybe we just create those spaces ourselves, even if it's just the five of us. So thanks for sticking with us. And this has been another episode of the Salted Nest Podcast. Really do appreciate the listen.